Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. I would like to now reconvene the RDI-TPA Workgroup meeting. Workgroup members who participate remotely will need to disclose if any other individuals 18 years of age or older are present in the room at the remote location and the general nature of the members' relationship with such individuals. Are there any members participating by Zoom and any disclosures to be made? Tina Sloan?
Yes, I'm participating by Zoom.
Are there any individuals 18 years of age or older present in the room that you are participating in?
No.
Thank you. Welcome. Good morning. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Good morning.
As a reminder, workgroup members who are participating via Zoom must be visible at all times on the camera. Please log off Zoom if you need to leave the meeting and then log in when you're ready to join the meeting again. If you experience any broadband or internet connectivity problems while participating in the meeting, that would be remedied by joining without video. You must announce the reason for your non-appearance when you turn off your camera. And now we will take roll call. Recording secretary, will you please call the roll?
Gavin Beasley.
Here.
Brown. Here. Richard Camarello. Here. Kathy Crescia. Here. Alia Diaz-Catano. Here. Brent
Here.
Vanessa Escobar. Here. Paula Estrada Rabelas. Here. Lori Harvey. Alan Hazeman.
Here.
The Herrera. Here. Han. Here. Vincent Morgan.
Here.
Joshua Notham.
Here.
Benjamin Odell.
Here.
Andy Redfern.
Here.
Kathleen Raleigh.
Here.
Rebecca Sackett. Here. Tina Sloan.
Here.
Dana Sullivan. Here. Carla Valdez. Leah Wallleitner. Here. Wallace.
Here.
Beverly Young. Here. Amber Quorum.
Thank you. We're going to move to item 1B, which is the opening remarks of representatives from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Commissioner Brown, would you like to make an opening remark?
Happy Friday, everyone. It's super exciting. Thank you for coming back for day 2. Thanks.
Wonderful. And is Commissioner Francois with us this morning? And would you like to make a comment? And Mr. Ibrahim.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Chair Redfern. It is, after I was processing sort of all the conversations last night, I'm just so thrilled. I feel like this is such an incredible collection of people at the right time doing the right work, and just thrilled to see what you're going to do. Today, I'm just going to touch on some nuts and bolts. Towards the end of the day, you will have a briefing from Erin Sullivan, who will tell you all about everything you need to know about travel forms and reimbursements and all of those fun things. In addition, I will be asking sort of this question. So I'm going to put this out up front so that you can sort of take some time and think about it and then about what you want to share around it. This is our best guess about how to meet your needs as adult learners in terms of resources, in terms of communication, in terms of structuring the day, all of those pieces. So the question I'm going to ask at the end of the day is, how can we better meet your needs as adult learners to participate in this process and develop recommendations? That's what I'm very curious about. So you are in the middle of our best guess, and we want to get better always. So that concludes my comments.
And Dr. Sandy will be joining us later this morning. So if it's amenable to the group, we'll go back and allow for her opening remarks when she arrives. let's move to item 2B, the overview of RDI-TPA Workgroup focus areas. Does our workgroup staff have a presentation on this item?
We do.
Great,
Yes.
please.
So we're going to transition pretty quickly into breakout rooms today. And the bulk of today will be spent in groups that are mixed by your role on the work group. So there'll be a balance of classroom teachers, a balance of teacher educators, and a balance of TPA experts in each group. You may notice, not on that one. Good. There you go. You may notice that you have a number on your name tag, and we're probably wondering what that is. This is not your group number, so I just wanted to clarify that. So before you, this is sort of your role. Right? So 1s, you are classroom teachers. 2s, you are teacher educators. 3, you are performance assessment experts. And just some words about who's included in that group: people from 1 and 2. Right? And so there are a lot of diverse experiences in that TPA expert group. There are teachers on special assignment. There are people that do research. It's very diverse in that section. So that's we're going to get to that. I want to front load some structure for the day, just so you can have some ideas of what you're going to do for such an extended period of time in your groups. And there will be touch points. There is some sort of guidance and support. Anything that I offer here today in terms of how you might want to proceed in your work groups is a recommendation. Ultimately, it is up to you as the group to determine how you will proceed. And I feel confident with this group, with a lot of very sharp educators, that we'll find our way, and you'll probably improve upon what I have laid out here. So I want to talk a little bit about focus areas. And as you probably noticed yesterday, there's such a broad scope that is within the purview of this group, right? The assessments themselves as tools, and also the entire ecosystem that it is implemented in, the accreditation process, the embedding, the questions we're asking of program completers, local scoring. These are big, broad areas. To help today, what we have done is we have taken all of the elements of statute, so all of the pieces that we are going to be required to do when the law passes, if the law passes, which is, as you know now, aligned to the work group charge. So when we're doing that, we're meeting the charge. We have broken it out into focus areas. And these are literally the sections of 44320.4 that the group will, at minimum, be required to develop recommendations for. They're going to start to kind of sink into the different chunks that we're going to become very, very familiar with over the next 6 months, 7 months. I wanted to just give you an overview of it and give you time to ask questions, clarifying questions, before I share what the groups are. I share the proposed guidance. I share the proposed timing. I share all of those pieces, and then you'll be in your breakout rooms. One thing to note is we are under a Bagley-Keene. This is a Bagley-Keene meeting, and so the public has access to this room, and the public has access to all the rooms that you're going to be in. So for the members of our public, they will be able to select a breakout room. And if they would so choose, they can come back to the main room and select a different breakout room. So they will be able to jump around and listen to all the conversations. In addition to that, we're going to invite groups to share out the discussions from their work groups after lunch. And so you have a chance to kind of talk a little bit about the concepts that you've mined, some of the initial thinking around how we might want to define them, operationalize some of the language that we have identified as a little subjective. Right? And we're going to talk about, share out about what did you arrive to as just some initial thinking? What are your lines of inquiry? What are your questions? And then what are some resources that, now that you've had a chance to maybe look at our initial set of resources that we've provided, what's missing? What would you like to know? And specifically that one, we're going to ask for a note taker to take notes on those specific things so that we get firm lists that we can then turn into resources to share back with you, share back with members of the public. All right, so focus area 1, and the handout that I'm referencing is on your tables. The title is Workgroup Resource, Identifying Lines of Inquiry for RDI-TPA Workgroup Focus Areas. For the folks online, this is 3B handout 1. And so just to orient you to this document, below the title, there is a summary of what the purpose of this document is. There is also the workgroup purpose as adopted by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing in August. And then we move into focus areas aligned to the specific elements that we need to make recommendations about. There is no interpretation here. There's no summary. We're pulling directly from what the code says. And you're going to see that as a theme, that we are not trying to interpret, and by we, I mean staff. We're not trying to interpret the language. We're just doing our best to flip it into a prompt or into questions that you can investigate. So for example, focus area 1 is an analysis of any modifications needed to the current assessments to ensure they are valid and authentic to the work of teaching, reasonable to implement in the wide range of classroom settings across the state, and appropriate for beginning teachers. There are a lot of concepts to unpack there, and there are a lot of concepts to start to brainstorm, not to come up with final definitions, because this is an iterative process. Much in the way that Matt pointed to the norms and some possible additions. Anything that we decide on in this group, you can reopen and update. So this is an iterative process. And so for this step, I would caution the breakout groups not to get stuck in coming to specific definitions, okay? But really just kind of unpacking the concepts that you have or the associations that you have with the concepts. I just in hearing the discussion around the term formative, I mean, there are so many different ideas about what formative is. Whether we're talking about common formative assessments, which may function as summative assessments or perhaps interim assessments, or we're talking about formative assessment of being in the moment and opening and closing gaps in learning, right? There are a number of different ways that as educators, we talk about formative assessment. So it's going to be really important to start to unpack these things and come to a shared understanding about what these things mean. This is critical for our recommendations because we're going to be transmitting recommendations, presenting recommendations to a separate but related body that has separate but related concepts or understandings of what these things mean. And so one of the things that we're going to endeavor to do in this group is to come to not a definition, but here's our understanding of what we're talking about. And this is the basis. This is the understanding we're using to make recommendations. That's going to be part of it. Yes, Brent.
So Adam, one of the challenges with our task is being open and decentering our own sense of self and perhaps even expertise. But I do want to note that some of these terms are not only contested, but they're misused. And they're also the subject of what we call in cognitive research, misconceptions. In fact, when we're teaching our teacher candidates, one of our biggest challenges I found is decentering and working with and leaning into certain pre and misconceptions about assessment, for example, in cycle 2. Very concrete problem. So I appreciate our charge, but I also want to say we have to have space for misconceptions or preconceptions or P-prims or what we know about how people think and approach things, our own candidates included. Because our candidates do struggle with these terms as well. Just had to say that out loud. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other initial thoughts? And I'm going to get into the specifics. I told you I wasn't going to talk that much yesterday. I'm going to talk a little bit, and for that I apologize. But I'm going to take some breaks and just sort of provide you the opportunity or welcome the opportunity for feedback, for +1s, additions, all of those things. So that is focus area 1. And in your first task in the breakout, which there are documents that are waiting for you in your breakout rooms, and they have the pacing and the timing and the roles and all of those things ready for you. There's structure in there. So the first task is going to be unpacking some of the concepts. You're going to go through focus area 1, 2, 3. And you're going to do all the steps for each focus area, if you so choose to use that process. We've broken out the concepts from the section of code into bullets or into lettered items. And so you can take them in turn, you can jump around, you can do whatever you want, but they are broken out. And then there's also, of course, E, which just says that, are there other concepts, either explicit or implicit, that we missed that need to be surfaced and discussed in this? That's an example of focus area 1. Focus area 2, recommendations for how programs might embed the assessments into coursework and clinical work to avoid duplicative work for candidates. So after your first hour with focus area 1, if you choose to follow the process that's being provided, you'll have another hour after a short break with focus area 2. We discuss embedding. There are a lot of duplicative to explore and unpack what that might mean. Are we talking about experiences with the TPEs that might feel redundant? Are we talking about experiences with the TPEs that are intended to be iterative and build off of each other, but are not feeling that way? What do we mean here? Also, here is a gem. To the maximum feasible extent. So what is an appropriate expectation around that can be used or considered or applied to recommendations that affect or address such a broad range of educator preparation programs? So that's going to be focus area 2. So you've spent an hour with 1, had a break, spent an hour with 2, have another break. There's 3. And the focus in this third area shifts to accreditation. And the recommendations to strengthen accreditation, the accreditation system to ensure programs embed. So that first chunk, you talked about embedding, avoiding duplicative work, and now you're going to have a discussion about the concepts within this focus area, thinking about strengthening accreditation to ensure embedding, and then offering sufficient clinical and pedagogical support and support candidates to pass the assessment. There's some additional unpacking that's going to happen in focus area 3, and you'll have a chance to do that. And this will be the third hour of this, so you will be total pros and will have probably gone your own way at this point and done something much more creative and interesting with the time. And then there's another piece that exists. There's another piece that shall exist if the law passes. If 1263 passes, then there will be an addition to Education Code section 443.0.2 D9, which has some potentially large implications. The commission shall report the number of programs with low pass rates and assist these programs to use evidence-based strategies to support candidates to pass the assessment for all administrations of the assessment. There shall be no fees to candidates for these instructional supports. A lot of big things to unpack there. And again, with everything, there's going to be a suggested breakdown that you are totally free to use or not. I want to just touch on focus area 4 and 5 and why we're not going to spend a 4th hour in breakout rooms doing focus area 4 and 5. Focus area 4 and 5, in our first sort of reading of this, seem to be a little bit more concise and less broad than the first 3 focus areas. And also will be informed, will come up in the course of considering the first 3 focus areas. And as such, we're going to be considering these in January if we hold to the current scope and sequence of work group meetings. And so not to get too far ahead of ourselves, we thought, let's buffer out the first 3 meetings to the best that we can, knowing that the next one's really on TPA the tool. And then we're gonna leave it up to the chairs how we want to do perhaps the same process on focus area 4 and 5. And 4 reads, recommendations for how programs can engage in local scoring of the assessment to inform program improvement. The commission shall maintain a secondary passing standard for the teaching performance assessment. Again, this is a section of code that will become law on January 1st if the governor signs the bill or doesn't sign the bill and just lets the bill become law. And so I think I mentioned incorrectly that the commission adopted a secondary passing standard in October. That was the December item. So if you want to read a little bit about what that was and sort of how that played out, that's a really good item to reference about the passing standard. And then focus area 5 is really about our users, the end users of the system, right? Suggested questions for program completer surveys to understand candidate experience of programmatic support for assessment completion. So what are the questions that we're currently asking? We'll have those for you. They are already, I believe, linked in the resource document shared yesterday or shared a week ago. And we're going to think about, after the course of all of this, what are the questions that we are asking annually, periodically, whatever interval makes sense, to understand the lived experiences of the people that are in the system, that are the end users of the work that we're doing. I've that up. Oh. Okay. So now you can look at who's in your group. Right? So what I'd like to do is just ask you to take note. We're going to run through the proposed sequence, and I'm gonna, let me stop there. So I've talked about just how the focus areas were taken from 443 to 0.4, broken into focus areas, broken down into concepts for you to discuss, for you to start to think about your own experiences with them and resources you may need. Is there any, before we go into more specific detail about the breakouts, are there any questions about that construct, about how we've broken those pieces down? Or anything else at this point?
I do, my vantage point, I kind of want to echo something Brent said, maybe in a different way. In my past history as a teacher, I've been in different work groups where we were constructing rubrics, and I've been through that, talking about bathroom policy at a school site that we started. I know how tedious that could end up being if it's not like, hey, here it is, right? But I do worry specifically, I think focus area 1, when I'm looking through the focus areas, not having a common definition, but talking about concepts can lead to different people talking about the same thing with different understandings and could possibly create misunderstandings or misconceptions even within a single group or between groups. And I recognize that ed code is ed code and no definition was provided for certain things, but as a teacher, I had 8 to 10 different definitions for formative assessment depending on the admin giving it to me, right? As one simple example, focus area 1 specifically has some very lofty and important terms that it would be good to have a common definition for. I don't think in an hour even a single group would come up with a common definition and therefore would never hit the concept. We need to focus on the concepts. It just might be a little difficult if we're all speaking a different language to each other.
So when you get into your breakout groups, your discussion is really, and I would challenge you to one, do what you think makes sense in your breakout rooms. You know, to pick your structures and to proceed through these tasks in a way that makes sense to you. I'd also challenge you to, this is meeting one, we're at the broadest scope that we are going to be throughout this process. We will start to converge. We're in a divergent space. We will start to converge and we will start to get to the point where we're talking about what do we mean when we say embed? What do we mean when we say valid? What types of validity, construct, face, all of those things. What is authenticity? So we're going to get to that place. But you're absolutely right. And the intent of the discussion of concepts is to surface everything that you all have in your brains about those concepts right now before, you know, in our subsequent meetings, we start to pin them down a bit.
Ben, I would respond to what you're saying is, my feeling is the reason we're here is because there are disagreements on those concepts. And I think that's led us to this work group.
But I would echo that.
Oh, Tina.
Oh, thank you. I can't see all of you in the room, and I don't know who made the comment regarding the concepts, but I 100% agree. And if there is a special way that staff might capture these notes to ensure that we are continuing to revisit the kinds of definitions that each of our groups have put down around these concepts so that we can come to a strong common understanding of what we mean by some of these, particularly when it comes to the terms valid, formative, and reliable. I think those three concepts have a psychometric as well as operational definitions that we really need to understand well.
So I appreciate that. And also I think in a way to tackle that in initial meetings is just to be very open to multiple interpretations and then to explore multiple pathways of logic associated with all of those, you know, so that eventually when we place where we can come to some sort of mutual understanding of that, we have considered a lot of different ways of understanding those concepts. So.
And thank you for that. That's intent behind the design, and hopefully it functions in that way. And to Tina, thank you for your comments. Staff has noted, we will ensure that in addition to the note takers that we're suggesting as a role in your breakout audience that have a prompt to capture these things and email it to the RDI-TPA email address, we will be video taping each of the sessions to post online. And so we'll be capturing the product of those discussions in multiple ways. Beware, the mics are live in there, folks, right? So that is, you are in the public square, even in breakouts. So please before I move into some of the specific, well, let me just pause. Are there any other comments, questions about just this construct of the focus areas and the scope of the topics and the divergent space that we're in?
Focus area concepts, other concepts related to the charge of the work group. That's where we can add more and bring that back to the attention of the whole group. Even though these are centered A through D, there are others that we can bring back and say are probably as important. I'm certainly thinking evidence-based is a highly contested space. So I'm surprised it didn't make it onto the focus concept list, but I'm glad that I'll have a chance to talk about it.
We'll appreciate, all 24 of your eyes on what we missed. And then also, it's worth re-mentioning that the things that are represented in the focus areas those are the things that at minimum the work group can provide recommendations on. So, you know, the placeholder that Brent is highlighting is open to you all. There are concepts in this space. And again, you know, not to tip the hand too much because I don't want to get ahead of the co-chairs that you're going to elect later today. But what we're going to be doing possibly is we're going to be taking all of your thoughts about assessment or about the performance assessment tool and the concepts in focus area 1. We're going to be bringing that back to you in the next work group meeting. We will be totally focusing on that focus area. And part of that can be starting to move from here are the unpacked raw thoughts that we all have around these things. And now let's start the logic models, the different trails. Has everybody noted which group they are in and which room they are in with their group?
So this is for today. Is this the group that we're going to be in moving forward other days?
These are the suggested roles for your group. And again, these are on the documents they're in the breakout rooms for you. First is a facilitator. And I want to just take this opportunity, forget if there's a slide in here on it, but we've taken the norms that you adopted yesterday. You took a vote on it. These are your norms. And they are always open to, in a point of a meeting to revisiting. And that could be a structure if this group wishes to revisit norms at the beginning of each meeting. But the role of the facilitator, in addition to keeping the conversation flowing and ensuring an equity of voice and that people are being drawn into the conversation, is to enforce norms, or not enforce, but just to keep the norms at the front of the conversation. That's a little harsh. You are the norm enforcer. They shall serve. So one thing you may want to do is, since we're in the mode of surfacing concepts where there may be some ambiguity, is just check in with your norms with your group when you get in there. That might be a good thing to do. The note taker. You are a critical person in this role. There is a handout that has each of the focus areas and the questions in it. And we're asking you to be the person that take notes such that take them however you want. We can sift through them. So if you're more of a, I'm just going to capture everything, or if you're more of a, I'm going to repeat what I just wrote and see if everybody agrees, it's all good. But just please do make sure that you email the product of all 3 of your discussions to the email that's listed on the handout waiting for you in the other room. There are suggested timings for each focus area. There are 3 rounds, 1 hour per focus area. I have slides on this, I'm sorry. Better, apologies. There are suggested timings. This is inaccurate. They should each say 15 minutes. Those are suggested timings. You are free to go long, go short, whatever you wish. It's your time. And the idea is, and for the note takers, ignoring the and knowing that those are all 15 minutes, this is a possible intro. Let's brainstorm possible attributes of the focus area concepts. Notes. Let's discuss what you know and have learned to honor both the experience that you all bring in incredible form into this forum, as well as perhaps some of the inquiry that you did last night or a week ago with the resources that we've shared in the initial tech set for this work. Questions, and this is where you are giving us staff marching orders. So questions to which you would like responses, things you need to know. We're going to build an FAQ. And then sources that you would like to have to support deliberation. What more do you need to know? It may or may not exist. If what you want does not exist, we will let you know, okay, and try to find you the closest approximation. If you've ever used Instacart, we'll do our best to get you the substitution for the thing. And the CTC staff that is here today in the back, say hello. They are, my task is to take your requests like on Monday and Tuesday and flip them and route them to the right experts. And you have the right experts here. On that, I just want to touch back to roles, because you're going to have, the object of this is not to come to answers, is to generate questions and to start to discuss concepts. So, I recommend resisting the impulse to solutions, the impulse to answers, the impulse to the things that maybe some of us who have that, I'm a problem solver in my brain, and that's what I do, and I want to get my path going, and we're going to do this. And I challenge you to hold the inquiry space, to hold that divergent inquiry space to consider these concepts. So staff is going to be in there, and you may know staff. You're like, oh, I know. I've seen a presentation from this person on this. They know everything about this. But in this process, staff is really here to listen. They're here to hear the raw concepts that you have in your brains around some of these things. So this is a chance for them to really listen to you, to not have to be the expert in the moment, but to be an observer of your process. We will have staff from the technology team. We will have them here at lunch to help you if you were unable to access your email last night, or set up multi-factor authentication. And also to run the Zooms. So they will be circulating. I will also be circulating, and the public will be participating. And the liaison will be circulating. Anna Marie will be jumping in and out of rooms, and Jeanette will be circulating. So that's kind of the vibe. That's the breakout. And so with that, I want to just open it up one more time for questions about the process. Yes, Joshua.
Can I get some clarification on the times that you have on the slide before this? Because you want us to transition back at 11:50 for 1 hour lunch, but if I'm looking at the time frame, we haven't started focus area 1. So how do you intend on?
So this is correct. The document that you're going to have in the room is the correct one, right? So we made the decision to go from 2 focus areas to 3, and so we just caught a little bit in the timing. But let me just read it to you so that everybody hears this, and so the folks online can hear how the timing is, because they don't have this. So focus area 1 is from 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. It's broken up into 3 15-minute chunks, 4 15-minute chunks, 4 15-minute chunks. And then there's a 10-minute break in between round 1 and round 2.
It's
9:15 now.
Yeah. That's part of
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we gonna get all this?
We will adjust the timing. So take the timing here and use the starting, whenever you start is your starting point for this time. Apologies.
But we'll come back here at 11:50.
Yes.
And if the groups end up needing more time, then we'll adjust the schedule as needed.
Apologies for those errors.
Are there any other questions for staff regarding the work that we're about to engage in? Right, I'm seeing that it is 9:17. Let's take a 13-minute break and find your room, and we'll get started in our rooms at 9:30. Everyone, for your commitment and the time that you spent in your breakout session. Just trying to do a quick check-in since none of us were in all of the rooms. Would it be beneficial for the group to have additional time in their breakout rooms after lunch. Seeing at least one group said yes.
I think it depends on if you want us to get through all three.
That's a great question. So I think our emphasis is on at least 1 and 2. Okay. We're a little more comfortable with the progress we made on 1 and 2. So in terms of presenting out, what we'd like to do is give each group about 5 to 10 minutes to share their main talking points from 1 and 2, and if you were able to get to 3. Would it be beneficial to meet in our groups maybe for 20 to 30 minutes after lunch to work on the presentation piece of it, gather thoughts, and then be prepared about 30 minutes later to come back? Okay, great. So okay, wonderful. So let's have our plan be that we go to lunch from 12 to 12:45. There's a cafe over here. There's also a cafeteria on the second floor.
I don't think the cafeteria has food service, but there are 2 food trucks parked outside the buildings, between the buildings here and the parking lot. And we have not been disappointed at the food trucks yet. Make good choices. We need to stay awake till 3. Put you under. I won't let Adam barbecue the beans, no, we gotta stay awake. So, but yeah, that's so food trucks move pretty quickly, and there's places to sit outside, or if you want to.
And there's a space upstairs.
Yeah, right upstairs. If you want to sit up there, there's some tables and chairs inside. Also across the way from us, the other building has a lot of tables, a dining area if you want to be inside.
The breakout rooms will also be open and available. So if anyone wants to do a working lunch and go back into those rooms, you can do that ahead of time as well. So at 12:45, we'll reconvene in our breakout rooms. And then at 1:15, we'll reconvene here to do a report out in the afternoon.
Able to do a working lunch with the faculty team.
Good point. We don't have quorum in our work groups, but we do have a need for the public to be able to observe, so. Sounds like you guys can.
So take 45 minutes.
Informal conversations if you like, but. Okay. Before we
Thank
break
you.
for lunch, could I just say one thing about the pending election this afternoon? So Mandy thank you for being the interim. You've been fantastic. We do need to elect co-chairs going forward. We elected yesterday. Tina, I think you're still online. You and Mandy were the chairs pro tem for this meeting. And I'm so sorry you couldn't get here. The planes, Santa Barbara, the whole thing. I'm looking at you up there. But in any event, we do have an election this afternoon and an opportunity for you to nominate and elect. And we would propose and hope that you will support this proposal that there be a K-12 co-chair and a teacher education co-chair, given that these are kind of the critical pillars of this work, really live there. And what we'll be doing, again, just to remind everyone, we discussed this in the slide yesterday about roles. The co-chairs will be key partners with us in kind of planning and getting set for each of the future meetings as they roll up and representing you in that way. So just be ready and be, examining one another and determining, we can take multiple nominations and it'll be a majority vote. Okay, so I'll just leave that with you before you head for lunch.
Is there anything else for the good of the order before we conclude for lunch or break for lunch?
We can leave all our stuff in.
All right, well, enjoy, and we will see each other in breakout rooms at 12:45. I'd like to begin our afternoon session by just uplifting and going back to our work group norms. If everyone can pull those out and refer back to them. If there is something that anyone would like to offer or suggest or remind us, I would love to give us space to do that at this time.
I would like to.
Great, Devin.
Primarily because there were some, in our discussion yesterday, there were some things that I found that were offensive to me. And so I just want to reiterate recognizing the diversity in the room, and that's diversity of thought, diversity of experience. Sometimes we can discuss things that may reveal some of our own anxieties, but I think we also need to be aware of implicit as well as explicit biases. Some microaggressions, things that can be seen as stereotypes, and how some of the, and of course, you know, I know it's difficult because those microaggressions oftentimes we don't know, we're not aware of that, but I think we should always kind of take a step back and think before some of the things we say, to make sure that we are recognizing some of those, you know, diversities in the room, experiences in the room as well.
Anything else on the list that we'd like to uplift? Okay.
Very important thing that was just said. A typo in the first bullet point. After breaks, there should probably be a semicolon.
What?
After breaks, there should probably be a semicolon, or you could just put a period and capitalize please and put a period.
I'm going with the
I held
semicolon.
it for like 24 hours, you guys. I'm so sorry.
You're an English teacher, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Got it.
I didn't want to be that guy. I'm so sorry. Okay, or.
And Chris?
I'd like to support what Devin said and echo back to him yesterday a similar feeling that I had, and I found it interesting that even how we talk about place or location or where we think we're describing the work, often framed by researchers urbanicity or suburban or rural, but felt personally, not as a research topic, but as an actual thing. I just don't really know how to take in when people characterize urbanicity in the way they teach and the things that they teach sometimes as having this or that quality characteristic. So I just felt very sensitive that teaching myself in Harlem, where I started, many misconceptions, many stereotypes, many strange comments I got my whole life about that work. So when I hear people talk about places in LA, it can also feel jarring at times because I'm kind of like, I wonder if that's like my experience as a teacher in Harlem, where people just may not even know unconsciously or consciously what they're bringing to that table. So that's being more specific about some things that I just like to see. Be just careful about how we characterize the spaces that we
Seeing no other comments, we will move now to our presentations from each work group. We're asking each work group to share for about 5 to 10 minutes on your questions that came up, or your experiences, or the data or information that you need in order to proceed with the work. So for lack of a better way to do it, let's start with group 1 and go through to group 4. So is there anyone from group 1 who would like to present?
We have a couple.
Yeah, Jason and I are taking.
Now, are we talking about all focus areas or just?
If
area
you were
one?
prepared for all 3, let's do all 3. If you're only prepared for 1 and 2, that's okay as well.
Be like 2.5.
That's great.
So I'll just, for us, focus area 1, we just kind of talked about the audiences for the 3 focus areas. So focus area 1 seemed like the target audience was the assessment designers. Focus area 2 focused on the recommendations for the programs, and 3 recommendations for the commission to strengthen the accreditation system. For focus area 1, we talked a lot about what these terms mean. So attributes of valid and authentic, right? They're personalized and reflective of the teacher's context. Context came up a lot for us. So these things being able to actually reflect the contextualized experiences of the educators, that it reflects actual classroom skills, it's practical, applicable, Formative, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. As we saw, the assessment is very summative, but for formative, we're thinking it's ongoing, constructive, low stakes, there's growth, and can give timely feedback where candidates can take actions to and opportunities to revise their responses. Get formative. Reasonable, related to, again, context, that it can be adaptable and flexible for diverse classroom experiences. And we also discussed how the resources of the schools can kind of impact some of these factors and how well the candidates can address them. Appropriate. We made this distinction between beginning teachers and credential candidates, those are two different things. And in order for something to be appropriate, it should be developmentally oriented, thinking of its relevance, the different developmental components and characteristics of candidates. Is it inclusive of teacher-learner progressions, that it's an actual continuum and not just like, here's the beginning? And we added a additional recommendation for it to be evidence-based. So that was our E.
And we have lingering questions that remain for focus area 1. The initial one that Jason just mentioned is shifting. Can we shift the language from saying beginning teachers to credential candidates? Because we recognize that those are two completely different things. And first-year teachers are beginning teachers, but credential candidates are those who currently don't hold a credential in that area and are working towards it. Is the TPA actionable across different classroom contexts? That's our lingering question. What is reasonable to ask of credential candidates in terms of coursework, clinical practice, and then assessment? And how are we considering those things? And what are the connections between support and passing scores between the Cal, TPA, Ed TPA, and FAST in terms of area 1?
Focus area 2, how programs might embed the assessment into coursework and clinical work to avoid duplicative work for candidates. There was this topic was, is it duplicative or does it just seem that way to candidates, and how can we make that more clear for candidates? Maximum feasible extent seems to be an equity issue, as various institutions have different resources and structures that make one institution's maximum feasible different than another's. That the program itself involves formative approaches to help candidates with the assessment. So when we're embedding better, we can also try to increase the relevance in order to better embed within the programs. It should be but embedded within the coursework and clinical work means that there's a scaffolded approach. And then, any questions?
And then our questions are, what are the accountability measurements? Who's responsible for the passing rates? Is it the IEGs? Is it the individuals? Is it the CTC? Like, how are we holding accountability for the programs and embedding them? And our question is, what does the CTC currently communicate to the IEGs regarding how to embed the assessment into coursework and clinical work? So we just want to know what that type of communication is outlined for all of the different programs, so that we have a clear vision of how we're moving forward.
And stop. We did get to focus area 3, but
well, there was one more too, which candidate, we also like to know more information on passing rates in terms of elementary, secondary, and special education, and see what the data looks like in terms of embedding the assessment into those different programs and how that reflects in passing rates.
We still have time if you'd like. We had a lot of questions.
lots of questions.
A lot of discussion.
So for focus area 3, we spend a lot of time on this idea. One distinction between clinical and pedagogical support, but this idea of like, what does it mean to be sufficient, and how do we make that because of all the different contexts and unique characteristics of each of the different programs, how do we make it fit for all contexts? And so we have these kind of components for what sufficient meant, that there is room for these contextualized circumstances, that programs had a model of support. So they actually had a support model that existed that they used. Things like having minimum number of observations. Sufficient is clearly defined by the institution. Sufficient means that they pay attention to the resources of the various institutions. Sufficient is evidence-based. Sufficient is culturally and linguistically and differently able supported. We also are thinking through multiple measures. So what are the other ways that candidates can show their competency?
We also talked about what data measures are we collecting in terms of passing rates for students, and so what do we look in terms of passing rates for multi-language learners, backgrounds, educational levels, and different credential areas as well.
Anyone on the team wants to share anything additional we missed? A lot to condense down.
I'm really impressed with the work that you did, and thank you for that. Group number 2.
I'll report out for group number 2, and please, by all means, if I'm missing something or I don't give something justice, please interject. So focus area 1, we had a lot of discussion on validity and authenticity, and so what is valid, what is authentic, and what does that look like in the work of teaching. We also mentioned that we need some additional data to really determine validity, reliability beyond just the psychometrics. Our perception is that the quality of the implementation assessment could be compromised if the focus is only on the statistics rather than the inclusive or being inclusive of qualities feedback. So we also mentioned that we need to know candidate and the stakeholders' feedback in the TPA process. We thought that was important to know. And so on the formative area, we had a lot of discussions and questions, because formative implies that the candidate receives timely, substantive feedback that informs next steps towards improvement. Current process provides a score, but doesn't include more holistic feedback. So one of the questions we have is, does the law imply that the formative nature of the assessment is contained in the preliminary phase of the teacher preparation alone, or inclusive of induction and future evaluations? Some additional questions that we had related to focus area 2 is, how do the results of the induction plan get into induction programs? It's possible to make the TPA assessment formative in alignment with the law. Does a candidate lack of being able to use written academic language expected in the TPA deny them a career? Mentioned some of the challenges that candidates have in formulating a understandable response as interpreted by the assessor on the TPA. And then, is the TPA really appropriate for a beginning teacher? You know, the same thing. Does that beginning teacher look like? What's expected of a beginning teacher? And does the TPA naturally align itself with that? So we'd like to see some data related to pass rates of institutions as well to help make more well-informed decisions. Focus area 2, the current process is duplicative. We had a lot of discussion on this duplicative work and nature of the Cal TPA because the metrics for accreditation calls for duplicity in and of itself. And so some of the questions that we had is, how can we modify the process to align with the law that calls for it not to be? What exactly is meant? How did this even come about? What are the components of the Cal TPA that candidates are identifying as being particular? Do we know what causes anxiety within the TPA process? Because I know that kind of went along the same lines of being repetitive work, having that anxiety. What exactly is causing that? And is there a way to collect that type of data? And is it necessary or valuable to do the coursework and do it again for the TPA that is duplicative? So we the nature of programs are naturally duplicative in and of themselves. And so at what point does it become a burden or a problem? What do candidates report as being duplicative in the credentialing process regarding the TPA? So there's a lot of discussion and questions around that. We did get the focus area 3. I'm at my notes right now, but you know, chime in or have any to add for the area.
Great job, group 2. Thank you for your feedback. Group 3.
Hi, I am the spokesperson for group 3, but group members, please feel free to chime in. There's a lot of overlap with what we've heard. But in terms, and we also really just got to focus areas 1 and 2. But in terms of valid and authentic to the work of teaching, we talked about how it really has to involve students. It has to involve an array of tasks that across candidates captures the range of what's involved in teaching. The contexts may be different, but the knowledge and skills evaluated need to be representative of teaching. We also discussed the extensive writing that's required within the existing TPA models. And we talked about how we didn't think that was necessarily realistic or authentic to the day-to-day work of teaching. And that the writing required privileges some candidates over others. And we just thought about ELA over math, right? And what would it look like to provide UDL options? So moving on to being formative in nature, we said this really requires a tight connection between the IHE and the hiring LEA. I can't remember which group it was, but somebody else was talking about the IDP. And we also talked about formative both for the candidate and formative for the program. So the programs should be using data to inform their work. And we said that we cannot get to truly formative unless we also are getting to truly embedded within them. I'm jumping around a little bit here, but could the goals candidates set at the end of the TPA become part of their IDP? So strengthening that connection between the TPA and the IDP. In terms of reasonable to implement in a wide range of classroom settings, we can't arrange for the, or if we can't account for the full range of contexts in California, just realizing the vast size of California, all the different contexts, what should the TPA focus on? And we discussed the need for orientations for the mentors to the TPA expectations, that candidates must have opportunities to perform in a way that allows them to be assessed fairly. When thinking about what's appropriate for beginning teachers, again, we wrestled, maybe that was group 1, with what, the candidates are taking this at the end of their preparation, so they're not actually beginning teachers yet. However, and we also acknowledged, that teaching is a profession in which you're continually growing. Like Lisa, you talked about that yesterday. So teachers are continuing to learn and develop, but day 1 as a beginning teacher, you are still responsible for the learning of the students in that classroom. You're responsible to those students, you're responsible to their families. So what does it mean to be a competent beginner? What does that look like? And then appropriate, that language suggests they should be able to complete this within their context, whatever that is. Some other concepts we talked about were equity. How is this equitable for our candidates? And that again gets back at that UDL for candidates from all demographics. And then also thinking about equity as we need to think about how are we preparing teachers who can teach in a way that empowers all students in their spaces. How do we get at that with the TPA? Also, how is it possible to embed culturally sustaining pedagogy within the TPA? How does that get assessed? I'm jumping around a little bit, but additional resources we're interested in looking at performance assessment design standards. We talked a lot about how those actually control what is on the content of the TPAs. This gets at the accreditation piece, but the multiple subject, single subject program standard 5, which has TPA specific language within it. We also are interested in case studies of program best practices for embedding the TPA and for making it informative. And then moving on to, sorry, again, I'm jumping around, but focus area 2 for embedding the assessments. We wondered, what is the array of support systems that programs with high pass rates have built in? What are the unique support systems that are offered? What evidence do we have to support the idea that these are strong support systems? How do these support systems differ depending on the context of the program? How could evidence-based best practices be built into accreditation systems? Also, we talked about how the idea of embedding feels one-directional. How might we make it bi-directional? Shout out to Shayna for that. In terms of avoiding duplicative work for candidates, if the assessment and the program are truly interconnected, this addresses that duplication issue. We talked about how, with accreditation, we get at this with the TPEs that introduce practice assess. We need to help candidates see the coursework components as the practice with the TPA then as the assess. And I think those are our key points. Group members.
Thank you very much, Group 3. Group 4.
So, first of all, I just want to throw this out. Like, I imagine everyone feels the same way, but I loved our group and the diversity of thought and the different ways of approaching it. And so, any group members, if there's anything to add, you included, Tina, I know you're on Zoom. Feel free to jump in, okay? This is not going to be as clean, I think, as everyone else's, and I apologize in advance. But we talked a lot about starting in focus area 1, authenticity, and kind of the notes we have is teaching. I'm pulling from different spots in the text, okay? But it's basically, we've centered a lot on the word organic when it came to authenticity and flexibility, and relating that to like what happens on a daily basis for a teacher. Because you can't necessarily anticipate your students' needs on a day-to-day basis, and you can't necessarily know exactly the context of that day, right? And so it's just being ready to jump in, not check something off of the list, but have something organic, right? And so that we talked a lot about authenticity and that specific kind of definition. Formative in nature, we discussed a brief definition for it, where we talked about a chance for like the program to support the candidate with their needs, and also the opportunity for a candidate to help determine their needs as well. And so with that in mind, to be able to figure out what happens next, along with the formative impact of programs being able to measure kind of how they're doing, right? We talked a lot about continuum of our CSTPs and basically the different levels of sophistication based off of like experience levels and where they're at as a beginning teacher, right? And the fact that we do need like a common arc with the trajectory of a teacher where we could have like rubrics that are in common, different things like that to kind of have places to pull from. Because rubrics could maybe in the current iteration be a little overwhelming for candidates. And then we talked a lot about like benchmarking over time, chunked, iterative process, timely feedback. When it came to reasonable, we talked about bureaucratic, localized based on best practices, there's a wide range of classrooms, so being able to support the students in front of them to the best abilities, right? And we talked about appropriate for beginning teachers with the idea that we want to focus on the basics with an understanding of what it is to help them grow and succeed. And so with that, some of the questions that we have. Finally, sorry, last thing. We talked about cycle of continuous learning and improvement and the idea of like reflection and adjustment that happens in the agency of the student teacher in the classroom or the intern in the classroom and how they implement that, right? Especially if you're in a classroom that's not necessarily yours, but there's another teacher and your guest in the room, right? And that feedback is super helpful. And it would be very helpful to have strong feedback throughout this process. And also the idea that there's mentors helping along the way and like the incorporation of them, okay? So some of the questions we had, what are the different structures to ensure we are making recommendations for the reasonableness and appropriateness of the assessment? Can we look into how some students score differently by program and how this can help us understand the work we do to envision a better situation, quite frankly, the students sitting in front of them? Can we help students have better experiences? What are the most successful programs? What's it look like? What are the best practices for programs scoring well with the TPA and the passing rates? What is the percentage of the alumni who continue in education after doing well in the TPA? Like, what is the impact we're seeing in the long term, right? And how many of those teachers feel effective? Do school districts have metrics of how many early career teachers continue on and that are in induction? Can we see data with the correlation between induction and the TPA folks? Can we get data on where the field placements are and how effective they are in sustaining the career? If it's a bunch of first-year campuses or first-year teachers on one campus, which oftentimes sounds like it happens across the state, there's less expertise for them to grow from different mentors and such, right? So are folks staying where they kind of start teaching, or are they moving around? Programs will prepare folks on different areas, but how are performance assessments responsive to the context and specialization they need for those contexts? Is the assessors pulled from matched based on target areas? Are they local? Are they human? Are they reflective of the population we have or that we would like to have within our schools? Are they local to the particular setting? And then outside that, we had a bunch of resources we wanted, including high-stake performance assessments in education outside of the TPA that we could maybe pull from, including things not just in America, but other countries and what they're doing, right? And what other criterias are to get a credential. So New York, for instance, with a master's degree program. Can we get information on what high-stake performance assessments in education that are formative in nature look like? Because there's been studies on this, they exist, right? What we need to answer some of the questions is data from testing services, who the assessors are, the validity, is it aligned? Different things like that. One other thing, are error codes, can we get data on the error codes and how frequently those happen? Things along those nature. If I scroll down, anything to add on area 1? That was all area 1, I promise area 2 is faster. All right, area 2, we had themes for area 2. Themes being equity and format, equity being programs that are equitable and responsive to people's needs, and then format being built into our understanding of equity and value. So is it standardized or localized? Is it responsive, recursive, or responsive in some ways where someone is learning and receiving feedback, or a process that's simply duplicative when failed or error coded? So for instance, someone turns in something, fails one portion of it, now they have to redo the whole thing, right? Which is duplicative. What is the purpose of the assessment? Is this about growing teachers or measuring their ability? To me, that's maybe at the crux of it, right? Is induction considered appropriate for beginning teachers? If formative, should this be embedded throughout the course of their program? So I'm starting to echo a lot of what's already been said. So with that in mind, I'm just going to go down to resources unless if someone has something to add. So resources needed would be the handbook for the TPA, information on what policy is with embedded and what we mean by that. Policy documents would be very helpful to see how that's broken out. What are the best practices from institutions doing it well? Can someone gather and synthesize the best practices for us? Because that would be a lot to go through, so it's digestible. Has there been consideration of the impact of TK-12 students? Instead of even focusing just on the teachers, but the students in the classroom, meaning how does it impact student achievement? How does it impact relationships in the classroom? Can we see the comparison or a crosswalk between the TPA and induction? Because we've heard within our group, a few people talked about, a lot of teachers see it very similarly and talk about how they're doing the same thing twice. How can we understand how our teachers are using performance assessment results in induction? Someone called that out a little bit earlier, because we can't share data, right? So if they're not in an induction program locally, it's based off of their IDP or ILP, depending on which program. How can we understand how our teachers are using performance assessment results in induction? What does being involved mean for people involved in the TPA process, like faculty and coaches? What does it mean? And are there organizational structures that are constraining or restraining that for the TPA? Recommendations that consider adaptations or modifications in TPA instruments that allow the program to innovate and or develop curricula around the TPA. Meaning of embedded, duplicative, standardized, and authentic. Those are the notes I have, very fragmented. I'm sorry, it's because I took notes on our whole conversation and we kind of went through and tried to pull up the salient points. Anything to add, group? I'm so sorry.
Just one thing, just in terms of, we spend a lot of time talking about the actual definitions, and this goes back to what people were saying yesterday. You know, what do you mean exactly about ensure assessments are embedded? Meaning, are you talking about the assessment itself as in chunked out throughout the program? Are you talking about the actual skills that the assessment is teaching? So, you know, we needed a couple of clarifications on exactly what those terms or what that question was trying to get at.
Thank you, Kathy.
And just as like the classroom educators, we would like some of the focus for the materials that we receive to be what impact this could or does have on actual students, K-12, because we're spending a lot of time and energy having conversations about the college students and helping them get through, or the early career teachers or uncredentialed teachers, and excluding the K-12 students from the conversation doesn't really align with the purpose of supporting.
All right, so note takers. If you were the note taker for your group, after you've had a chance to review the notes, we're going to send those by your CTC email to
RDI-TPA@ctc.ca.
Everyone have that?
It's the email that was emailed to us to get us here, correct?
Okay, so if possible, by the end of the workday today or tomorrow, if you can send those notes, they'll be synthesized, pulled together, and available for us to reflect on. So not just what you presented, but also the rest of the notes from your group as well. All right? With that, we will now open for public comment. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Yes, I'm sorry. Marche. Okay, Crane. Comment.
Yes, hello. This is Marche Crane. I've actually submitted my 5 questions. Is there any way I could actually state the questions, but could someone retrieve them in the commission room? Okay, if not, I'll just go through my questions. The first question I had was, what were the percentages of individuals whom did not successfully pass in their teacher credentialing program by way of the TPAs? And my second question was, will we hear from those individuals who didn't successfully pass a program? Excuse me. And the third question, there are many different evidence-based programs that the CTC could use, that the credential programs can use, like for example, MTSS, and also like project-based evidence, based learning, thematic quarterly themes to also be embedded into the credentialing programs. So is that something that CTC, could also, utilize? Well, the credentialing programs. And then lastly, because of this conversation that has happened today, and then yesterday, and then today on effective measures of the assessments. Will the credential programs be optional for future aspiring teachers? So what will happen since there's now a debriefing and a revamping of the programs? And that concludes my questions.
Recording Secretary, are there any other public comments? The public comment period for this item is now closed. That takes us to 4B. And I believe Dr. Sandy is going to.
Yes, conduct an election. Yes, everybody take a deep cleansing breath. We've done some amazing work. Can't hardly take it all in. We are going to accept first nominations and then take an election for 2 co-chairs. I'd like to take them separately, so we do first nominate and then elect a co-chair from the K-12 sector, and then secondly, a co-chair from the teacher education sector. Right, so that's how I'm looking to do this. And my first question is this: are there any nominations for the K-12 co-chair position? Yes, Beverly.
I'd like to nominate Mandy, who I think's done a wonderful job for us, and be an excellent continuing co-chair.
Any other nominations for the K-12 member co-chair? Seeing none, I will now close the nomination for the K-12 co-chair and open the election. Do I have a motion to elect Mandy as the co-chair for the RDI-TPA Workgroup? Moved by Kate Rowley, second by Ben Odell. Is there any discussion? I'm sorry? Okay, would you like to discuss?
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to the work this year.
Very good. Recording secretary, will you please call the roll?
Just jump by acclamation. There's no other nomination.
If there's no other acclamation, are we able to do this by acclamation? No, we have to do it by roll. Because we have a member who's on Zoom, we'll just do it by roll and it'll be okay. That's trust me, this is good. We get to our name. So, recording secretary, please call the roll. Nope, it's I or nay. Unless you're abstaining, in which case.
Alessa Reynolds.
Aye. Or, yeah.
Aye. Diaz Catano. Van Duker. Mr. Escobar.
Aye.
Estrada. Aye. Pauline. Aye. Alicia Herrera. Aye. Malcolm.
Aye.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Lee Redfern.
I will abstain.
Aye. Rebecca second. Aye.
Dina Sloan.
Aye.
Dina Sullivan. Julia Walliner.
Aye.
Wallace.
Aye.
Beverly Young.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Congratulations, Madam Co-Chair. We will now open nominations for the Teacher Education Co-Chair. Are there any nominations?
I have one there.
Yes, please.
Building on my previous success in this regard, I would posit that the categories are not mutually exclusive. And so even though my nominee, Tina Sloan, is listed as a teacher assessment expert, which she certainly is, she also has a long career as a teacher educator, and I would say that she fits that category, so I would nominate her as our co-chair.
Are there other nominations you'd like to put into the? Seeing none, I will now close the nomination for co-chair from teacher education and ask for a motion to elect Sloan as the co-chair from teacher education. Is there a motion? So moved. Moved by Mandy Redfern, seconded by, yes, Ursula, forgive me, I'm getting late in my day. Any further discussion? Tina, would you like to say some things?
I would. First, thank you. I think this is very, very critical work that we're doing. And I would be honored to represent you. I do have to say, however, that I will need to attend about 2 to 3 of our meetings via Zoom. And therefore, I completely understand if there is somebody who can be in person each time who might be better at representing all of you. Feel free to pull the nomination.
Thank you, Tina. Further discussion?
I think it would be important that we would select a person of color to serve in this capacity, just because of the conversations that we've engaged in. I bring that idea and lay it on the table.
Well, so we are now considering, we've got a motion and a second to elect Tina Sloan. I believe, okay, you're going to test my Robert's Rules of Order here. If you would like, if the mover or seconder would like to pull their motion or their second and new motion to reopen nominations, we can do that.
I will pull my second.
We'll pull your second. All right.
What a discussion. Isn't there a discussion?
We're in discussion.
Does anyone want?
Well, let's finish
As a
it. Let's.
person of color, I would not, to be honest with you.
Hold for just a moment, because we were, let's see, let me just keep track of where we were, Robert's Rules. We were in the process now of, we've had the second pulled, which means that we no longer have an active motion on the floor. Is that correct? Somebody with Robert's Rules expertise? Okay. We haven't gone back to a motion to reopen nominations, so I think we can continue discussion. I'm looking, with your permission and with all respect and apologies to Robert for Robert's Rules, discussion of the question of the higher education, teacher education representative.
So I have also served as an educator in multiple seats, and I'm available and I would be willing to serve as a servant of this group if selected. And I don't want to put my name out there if there's somebody else who's interested.
A non-eligible person, because I'm K-12. Is anyone else interested? Right, it needed to be asked. Does anybody want?
Someone said, what about Shayna?
I wonder if those of you who are in teacher education would mind identifying yourself, because I'm not sure the rest of the group knows who you are.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay. If you're in teacher education.
I'd like to formally nominate Shayna. Willing to do it.
Colin is, so before.
Sorry, Shayna.
Before we do that, can I have a motion to reopen nominations? Moved by Beverly, seconded by Colin. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right.
You can do motion.
We can't do a motion, we can't do an aye. You've got to do roll call. It was Colin moved it and Beverly moved it, Colin seconded it. Okay, roll call.
Adam Ducey?
Kevin?
Wait a minute, what are we voting on?
On to reopen nominations.
Open the nomination.
Ready? Devin Beasley.
Aye.
Lisa Brown. Aye. Patricia Camarillo. Kathy Prisha.
Aye.
Alia Diaz Catana. Brand Duper.
Aye.
Martha Escobar. Aye. Laura Nicholas.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Alicia Herrera. Jason Morgan.
Aye.
Joshua Norton.
Aye.
Benjamin Odell.
Aye.
Mandy Redfern. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Sorry, Ari, I didn't hear. Dean Raleigh. Aye. Rebecca Sackett. Aye. Tina Sloan.
Hi.
Matt Sullivan. Aye. Gail Warliner. Aye. Matt Wallace.
Aye.
Beverly Young. Aye. Motion carries.
All right, so we are reopening nominations now, and what I'd like to suggest is that we take this in a stepwise process where nominations are put into the conversation, and if the nominee declines to serve, they can put themselves out before we take a vote. Is that comfortable for everyone? Okay, so we have one nominee that's already been nominated, and that would be Tina Sloan. And Colin, would you like to read?
Let's nominate Shayna.
Shayna, is there, do we need a, that's just a nomination. I don't need a second for that. So Shayna. Are there, yes.
I'd like to nominate Ursula.
Are there any further nominations? All right, seeing none, what I'd like to do is invite each of these nominees to make a statement about their willingness and interest in doing this, and then we'll take it to the election vote. Okay, so Tina, we heard from you a few minutes ago about your availability, but if you would like to say any more, please, would you begin?
Thank you. I would be honored to chair this, to be one of the co-chairs for this work. And at the same time, I recognize the expertise in this room is vast, and you cannot go wrong, I believe, with the people who have been nominated here. And while if I was elected, I would work very hard at ensuring that I was doing my very best to represent what all of you are sharing in the room. I do want to be clear that at least another 2 meetings I will be having to attend via Zoom. So I will just leave it at that. I also appreciate the willingness, the desire to ensure that we have diverse representation of our group as well.
Thank you, Tina. Shayna, would you like to make any comments?
Sure. Similar to Tina, I really am honored to be nominated. And I am concerned because I also will be out for 2 meetings in December. And given institutional priorities that are happening right now, that I'm a little concerned about the additional time commitment.
But you're not declining. You're willing to be considered, but you've put those as disclaimers out there for the group. Is that what I'm understanding?
I would like to know what the additional time commitment would be so that I can make a good decision about whether or not I'd be able to do the work well.
Okay, so let's hold on that for just a moment, and I'd like to invite Ursula if you would like to make any comments.
Sure, I too am honored to be nominated. I have already set the dates aside in my calendar, and I'm planning to be at each of the meetings. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, I'm happy to be a servant of this group if selected.
Okay, so having heard from all 3 nominees, Adam, I was going to ask you, oh yes, would you speak to the role of the co-chairs as we've described it earlier?
Absolutely.
As expected time commitment?
So the co-chairs, there's a description that is currently on the slide around, and I'll just share some of the key points here. There's responsibility for leading the meetings, setting the agendas, ensuring compliance with Bagley Keene. tending to the general health and welfare of our group, and, you know, also coordinating with staff, overseeing the follow-up on action items, acting as spokespeople for the committee, and then sharing these duties in a balanced way amongst each other or with each other. Functionally, just sort of in terms of, okay, what does this mean for my calendar and how much you're gonna take of it? It means meeting with us to plan the agenda, to review what happened in the last meeting, to review sources from the meeting prior, to think about what the will of the group was, to listen to members of the group, and to come up with a plan for the next meeting, to include reviewing resources and, you know, being prepared. Typically, we like to do a run through, and then kind of coming in, and, you know, we do provide a lot of support. There are scripts, you know, we build the decks, we build the resources, we sort of do all of that. But just sort of helping to make sure that the process that we are running as staff is reflective of the will of the body, as opposed to perceptions of one or two staff people. And so that does mean, in addition to those times, there may be just, hey, can I grab 5 minutes? I wanted to run this by you, and that kind of thing. So there is going to be ongoing communication, and then sort of a planning and review and preparation. I would separate it out into those functions. Executive Director Sandy, does that match?
I think that matches my understanding as well. So, does that answer your question?
I'm gonna have to decline the nomination.
So Shayna is declining the nomination. Any further discussion before we move to the election?
I just want to be clear, check. Ursula is willing and available for all meetings?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I will decline my nomination as well.
Okay, so we have 2 declined and 1 nominee still on the table. Do I have a motion to elect Ursula to serve as the co-chair for future education? Moved by Kathy Kresha. Do I have a second? Moved by, let's take Josh, not Awesome. Good to get a chance of getting that right. Recording secretary, will you please call the roll?
Beasley.
Aye.
Lisa Brown. Aye. Patricia Camera. Aye. Equacia.
Aye.
F.S. Catano. Brenda Duper.
Aye.
Vanessa Escobar. Aye. Osla Estrada Revelas. Aye.
Aye.
Alicia Herrera. Dafan.
Aye.
Joshua Norton.
Aye.
Benjamin Odell.
Aye.
Mandy Redfern.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Tina Sloan.
Aye.
Sullivan. Aye. Yeah, Wortliner.
Aye.
Wallace.
Aye.
Everybody Young. Aye. Carries.
Thank you and congratulations to the new co-chairs of our work group, Mandy Redfern and Ursula Estrada. I can't remember the last.
Revelas.
Forgive me.
That's okay.
Ursula. I know it, but it's, you know. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
So next is item 5B, the general public comment. We will now open for public comment. Please be reminded that the time is limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
So we do not have any public comment.
Thank you. The public comment period for this item is now closed. We move on to item 6B, the closing remarks of representatives from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. So I'd like to provide space now for Commissioner Brown.
Thank you so much.
Woo! I wrote everything down so I don't forget it, because it is true what Adam said, I am a crock pot.
So I've been thinking all night about closing remarks. And first, I would like to really say thank you to Mary and Adam for your leadership in putting this gig together. Also, I would like to express immense gratitude to the commission staff who is in the room supporting the work. To extend that thank you to the many staff people who are not currently in the room, but do a lot of work to make this happen. So I'm really grateful to them. In addition to that, I am so thankful for every single member on this work group. I really appreciate your contributions, your thoughtfulness about this complex task before us, your dedication and your willingness to engage in this, in asking questions that are not easy to answer, nor are they easy to ask. So I really appreciate your willingness. I wish you all safe travels home, wherever that may be in the state. I hope you all have a relaxing and restorative weekend, and I cannot wait for October. There's some great things ahead of us, so thank you, thank you, thank you.
And Dr. Sandy?
I just want to echo all of those things. We started out with a plan. And, you know, we knew that the plan was going to be subject to all of you being here and animating it. And what a great, great set of discussions this has been, you know. That go along with doing this hard thing instead of the easy thing. And I am very excited and a little anxious about the shortness of time to get to our next meeting. But really very much looking forward to this work as we.
Okay. All right, we're gonna call our meeting back to order. We apologize for the connectivity. It appears everyone is back online, so Dr. Sandy.
I am concluding my remarks and turning it over to Ibrahim for his.
I have so I have no words, and so I think I literally need a new word because I'm simultaneous. Well, what a difference a year makes, and I am simultaneously intellectually blown away. I think there is this pause after you all finished your debrief where I think prefrontal cortices were a little bit fried and just like, and at the same time, I'm filled with just complete deep gratitude for you all and for your commitment to be here and the depth with which you engaged and just the I can't even hearing what you all just shared. Hearing how quickly you got to the tense issues that have caused conflict around this issue for a long time in this kind of a setting with ideas. I'm just grateful and blown away. I hate to be this facilitator, but I need your homework. I need all those emails. So I got 2, so I'm gonna need 2 more. But it's okay. And you know, it's all good. And we're going to try to turn this around pretty quickly for you, because I know there's going to be resources needed heading into the TPA item. So we're going to be wanting to meet with our co-chairs pretty quickly. I believe on my calendar I have agenda planning slotted for Monday, and so that's going to be the nature of this work group. There's a window. And then, you know, one more thing. One way, deep gratitude, homework, and
While you're thinking, I've got something about homework.
Go for it.
Vamp for you for.
Can you please do
I'm gonna
that?
vamp for you. So, homework, thank you for the homework that you're turning in today. But the speed with which we are going to be meeting again and again and again and again. And you know, we've got a day and a half for our meetings, but Today was evidence that it wasn't enough time to really get to the bottom of the tasks that we set for each other. So I believe that there will be important readings and activities that to prep yourself for the next meeting so that we are able to start having uploaded the kind of critical questions or resources, et cetera. And so I would really like to urge, recommend, and beg for your time when you can give it to be really well prepared. I mean, I know you were all prepared coming in for this one, but each meeting is going to be a lift that is going to require reading in between times. And the more we can really dedicate ourselves to that, the more likely we are to get through this as timely as we can. We've set aside our time expectations, and that's what's coming next.
Thank you.
There we go. Did I take you
You
where
did.
you wanted to?
And so with the reading and with the resources that we'll be sending to you, we sent you best guess about a universe of resources that might be helpful, some ways to break up the statute, to sort of chunk it, think about it. That's going to now, based on your feedback, start to become more focused. So in thinking about what that's going to look like, the preparation, as you know that it is our intent, and we will work with the chairs to make sure that what is needed, the structures, the things to focus on are clear, associated resources are clear. Staff is going to work to gather resources related to your questions, and we will turn them around quickly as possible. Last thing, after we adjourn, we are going to hear from Erin Sullivan, who is a member of the Professional Services Division, the interim director of the Professional Services Division, and she is going to be telling you all about travel. And so all of the reimbursements, all of those pieces, but we adjourn.
Yeah, we can adjourn, but Erin, why don't you come on up here? I'll see you. Yes.
That's all I have. And so I just thank you. And again, if you need anything, remember, I'm your person. If you need something, if you have, the thing I wanted to ask you was, if you have needs as adult learners, if you need a binder, if there are things just in going through this process that you need from us, please do send them my way. And I'll do my best to make sure that needs are met.
All right, so with that, I would now like to adjourn the September 2024 RDI-TPA Workgroup meeting. Please be reminded the next meeting is on October 14th and 15th of 2024. Great work, everyone.